Pastor Jennings.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me in the New Testament where did the apostles teach that you're cursed with a curse if you don't tithe?
Have you ever had a question that challenges everything you thought you knew about your faith? A question so tough, it rattles your beliefs to the core. Well, that's exactly what happened when one man stood up and asked Pastor Gino Jennings a question about tithing that many believers have wondered but never dared to ask. Where in the New Testament does it say we're cursed if we don't tithe? It was a question that hit at the heart of Christian tradition. And what Pastor Jennings said in response not only addressed that one burning question, but sparked a revelation that left the audience in complete awe. Stay with us as we dive into this powerful moment and explore the deep truths about tithing, curses, and the teachings of the New Testament. You won't want to miss this.
Pastor Jennings.
Yes, sir.
Can you tell me in the New Testament where did the apostles teach that you're cursed with a curse if you don't tithe?
Where the apostles preached it.
They taught that, Jesus or the apostles?
All right.
In the New Testament.
Give me the book of Hebrews quickly.
Amen.
Let's get Melchizedek.
In the book of Hebrews, chapter 7.
All right.
And we'll start reading at verse 1.
All right.
For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the king,
yes,
and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all, first being by interpretation king of righteousness.
Now what you're quoting is the Old Testament, the book of Malachi, I believe, when the Bible said, will a man rob God?
Rob God, that's right.
And of course, a man will rob God. A man been robbing God since man been here.
Malachi chapter 3.
But the mistake that preachers have made, they just focus on tithing only.
Right.
And just focus on that only. But the prophet Malachi didn't just deal with tithes, he dealt with tithes and offering.
That's right.
Real quick.
Malachi chapter 3, we're at verse 8.
Amen.
Will a man rob God?
Yes, he will.
Amen. Will a man rob God?
And again I say, yes, he will.
Yet ye have robbed
the Lord
me.
said you done it.
But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee?
But many of us play ignorant and want to ask, well, how in the world did we rob God? And how did God say it was done?
In tithes.
And what else?
And offering.
Not just one thing.
That's right.
Not just one thing. Tithe.
And offering.
And offering. Your question was, well, where did God preach it, or where did Jesus preach it, or where did the apostles preach it? Well, in order for it to be changed, then God would have given the apostles the revelation to preach against it.
That's right.
But there is no New Testament precept where the apostles or Jesus preached against it. And if the apostles or Jesus didn't preach against it, don't you hear Jesus said all things must be fulfilled that are written in the law of Moses and in the prophets, and this is the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me.
You're cursed with a curse.
You're cursed with a curse.
For ye have robbed me, even this whole nation.
So you just can't look at where he just say tithes. He said tithes
and offering.
And offering.
And offering.
You're cursed with the curse if you don't do neither.
That's right.
All right.
You're cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation.
Yeah.
Bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse.
And the storehouse is not the preacher's pocket.
That's right.
And the storehouse is not the preacher's house.
That's right.
You see, when we pay tithes and offerings, that's what keep the broadcast going. That's how churches got built. That's how we clothe naked folk, and that's how we feed hungry with tithing and offering. We have many hundreds and hundreds of poor brothers and sisters all around the world, in foreign countries, in India, in Africa. We buy land so they can grow food, so they can have something to eat. All of that fall in obeying God. How do we get that land? Through tithing and offering.
And offering. That's right.
Oh yes, we still pay tithing, we still pay offering.
The man's voice echoed through the room, and you could feel the tension rising. It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge. Pastor Jennings, without hesitation, opened his Bible, turning to Hebrews 7. He didn't just read the verses. He brought them to life, explaining how the practice of tithing is deeply rooted in both Old and New Testament teachings. The crowd leaned in as he began. Let's start with Hebrews, and we'll see what the word says. Pastor Jennings laid out the historical significance of tithing, starting with Melchizedek and Abraham. But then something shifted. He was about to answer the toughest question of the day. Boom. That's the moment everything clicked. Pastor Jennings didn't just address the question. He turned it on its head. Tithing wasn't a punishment. It was a reflection of our obedience to God's principles. And the curse wasn't about God cursing us. It was about the consequences of withholding what belongs to God. Then, Pastor Jennings dropped the truth bomb that no one expected. He didn't just speak about the curse of withholding tithes. He brought the entire room to a moment of deep introspection. As Pastor Jennings spoke, you could see it in the eyes of the audience. It wasn't just a matter of money, it was a matter of spiritual obedience. And in that moment, the entire room realized that the practice of tithing went far beyond financial obligation. It was about God's kingdom, His provision, and His will on earth. The man who asked the question wasn't the only one transformed by this response. His question had led the entire room into a deeper understanding of God's truth. But it wasn't over. The crowd was still buzzing with emotion, and Pastor Jennings had more to say. As the conversation continued, Pastor Jennings went on to emphasize the role of the church in the world today. The impact of faithful giving is not just seen in the walls of the church, but in the lives changed across the globe. The audience was no longer divided. The seeds of doubt that had been planted at the start were replaced by understanding. Tithing wasn't a curse. It was a blessing, a gateway to a deeper relationship with God. Still, the question lingered in the air. Does this change how we approach our giving? The man who asked the question seemed satisfied, but Pastor Jennings wasn't done yet. He had one final word for all of us. And just like that, Pastor Jennings summed up the entire conversation. Tithing and offering are more than just financial acts. They are acts of worship, faith, and love. They are expressions of obedience to God, who gave His all for us. So, where do you stand on this issue of tithing? Does Pastor Jennings' response change how you see it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into the scriptures. Next time, we're going deeper into the new covenant and what it truly means for us as believers. Is the old law really fulfilled, or do we still have a role in the old practices? Stay tuned for more insights that will challenge your faith and strengthen your walk with God. Where in the New Testament does it say that we're cursed if we don't tithe? This question, while simple, cuts right to the heart of how we view our relationship with God when it comes to money and giving. Tithing is often seen as a burden, a requirement, or even a law. But I want to show you today that tithing is more than a financial transaction. It's a spiritual act, a response to God's grace, and an act of trust. Let's start by turning to Hebrews 7. In this passage, the Apostle Paul gives us insight into the deeper meaning of tithing. Let's read together. Hebrews 7 verses 1 to 2. For this Melchizedek, king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, who met Abraham returning from the slaughter of the kings and blessed him, to whom also Abraham gave a tenth part of all. Now let's stop there. We see that tithing is an ancient practice, going back to Abraham, long before the law was given to Moses. But why did Abraham give a tenth of all he had? It wasn't because it was a commandment. It was a recognition of who God was and what God had done for him. Hebrews 7 verse 4. Now consider how great this man was, unto whom even the patriarch Abraham gave the tenth of the spoils. You see, the tithe wasn't about the law. It was about honor. It was about Abraham acknowledging that everything he had came from God. And that's what our tithing is, an acknowledgement that everything we have belongs to God. But here's where the tension builds. Let me ask you this. How many times have we heard the phrase, "You're cursed with a curse if you don't tithe"? It's a common phrase, one that often fills us with fear or guilt. But let's break this down carefully. Yes, in Malachi 3 verse 8, we hear God's words. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. And then comes the famous verse. Malachi 3 verse 9. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. Now some preachers and believers have focused only on this verse, teaching that God is cursing us because we don't tithe. But let's be clear, God is not punishing us because He's angry. God is teaching us the consequences of withholding what is rightfully His. Pastor's insight. God doesn't curse us because He wants to punish us. When we choose not to tithe, we are withholding blessings that God desires to pour out on us. The curse isn't from God's wrath, but from our disobedience. When we don't give, we miss out on the full measure of blessings He wants to pour into our lives. The curse is simply the absence of God's blessing when we choose to hold on to what is His. Now, let's move to the New Testament. We're under the New Covenant, right? So, does that mean tithing is no longer necessary? Let's turn to Matthew 23 verse 23. Jesus addresses the Pharisees, and in doing so, He reveals the heart behind tithing. Matthew 23 verse 23. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye pay tithe of mint and anise and cumin, and have omitted the weightier matters of the law, judgment, mercy, and faith. These ought ye to have done, and not to leave the other undone. Jesus is not condemning tithing. He's condemning the hypocrisy of focusing only on the legalistic aspects of the law, while neglecting the heart of God's will, mercy, justice, and faith. In this verse, Jesus is saying, yes, tithing is important, but it is not enough on its own. You cannot tithe and ignore the more important things, like love, justice, and mercy. The question we need to ask ourselves today is this: why do we tithe? Do we tithe because we fear the curse? Or do we tithe because we love God and trust Him to provide for us? Tithing is not about fulfilling a commandment. It's not about avoiding a curse. It's about obedience, faith, and trust in God's provision. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 7. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. God is not looking for reluctant givers. He is looking for hearts that joyfully give back to Him in gratitude for all He has done. Beloved, when we tithe, we are acknowledging that everything we have belongs to God. When we give, we are sowing into God's kingdom, and we are saying, Lord, I trust you with my resources. Our tithes support the work of the church, feeding the poor, building the ministry, and spreading the gospel. It's not about the money, it's about the faith that accompanies our giving. So, what does this mean for us today? I want to challenge you to reflect on your own giving. Are you tithing out of obligation or out of love? Do you give because you trust God or because you fear the curse? Remember, tithing is a spiritual discipline, a sign of our trust in God's provision. When we give, we are opening ourselves up to the blessings God has for us. And just as Abraham was blessed when he gave a tenth, we too will be blessed when we honor God with our tithes and offering.